right, welcome to WTF Stories and Advice. I'm Caroline Cranshaw, hypnotherapist and know-it-all. And today we have the amazing mental fitness coach. No, mental fitness expert and change provocateur, should we call you? No?
Sure.
Jimi Hunt.
That's me.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and I have known Jimmy for years and years.
10
years. Is it 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
And he's written some really cool books, and he has an amazing podcast. And I listened to his podcast the other day and thought, I should have Jimmy on the show. So here we are.
Here we are.
So I thought we could start with how we met, because that is an interesting story.
Well, it's an interesting fucking story. It really is.
Do you want to tell it? Or do you want me to tell
Well, I'll give you my version of it.
Okay.
Because, 10 years ago, I wasn't in a great place. And I was anxious and depressed and suicidal and all over the show. And I had decided that I was going to make a change. It took me a long time to get to a point where I realized I had a problem, and then I finally, went, shit, I should do something about this. And so I did something mildly unconventional, and I decided that I was going to lilo the Waikato River. And a lilo, if you don't know, for our international viewers, is basically a $9 pool float, something that you float on in the pool and sip your drinks on. I swam that 425 kilometers down New Zealand's longest river. And people were quite worried about that. It was quite scary for a lot of people outside of me because the river is mildly dangerous and I wasn't in the best shape and no one was coming with me. It was just me doing it by myself. And one of my our friends, Dan, was particularly worried because both Water Safe New Zealand and Surf Life Saving New Zealand had sent me letters saying, "You're a fucking idiot, please don't do this." And people were worried. And so one of the things that Dan did was he's like, "You need to go see this woman." I'm like, "Why do I have to go see this woman?" And he said, "Well, because she will help you." I'm like, "Help me with what? I'm fine." And he goes, "Look, she helps people get ready for professional boxing matches, and she helps all of this." And he's like, "She can help you with your adventure." And I was like, "What does she do?" And he said, "Oh, she's a hypnotherapist." I'm like, "Fuck, whatever." And he badgered me enough that eventually I went and saw you. And I saw you 2 days before Lilo the Waikato. Mm-hmm. And we sat down. It was late at night. It was about 8 o'clock at night at your office in Kauai you were at the time. And you asked me, "What are you afraid of?" And I said, "Nothing." And you went, "Yes. You don't seem to be afraid of anything." I'm like, "That's what I just fucking said." I'm like, "Yes." And we talked for a while, and then you asked me again, "What are you afraid of?" And I said, "Well, actually, I am afraid of something." My wife had just left me about 2 months previous. I found out subsequent to that she had been sleeping with a friend of ours. And then I found out not but a few days before we met that she was pregnant and we were going to have to figure out whose it was. And I said, "Look, I'm about to spend a couple of weeks alone on this river. And one of the things I'm really, really afraid of is having her in my head for those 2 weeks." And you were like, "Well, cool, I can get rid of that for you." I'm like, the fuck you can. Now, and just to clarify this a little bit, I was a militant fucking atheist. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, anything outside the realms of like, this is science and this is how the material world works, I want nothing to do with. And you're like, "Oh, I'll just get rid of that." I'm like, "What the She's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, well, what are you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to hypnotize you." And I went, okay. And so you hypnotized me to make me not think about my ex-wife. And when I came to, I said, well, what did you actually do? Like, what's the process? I need to know these things. And you said, well, what I did was I made it so when she comes into your brain, I replaced that with dancing monkeys and static. And I was like, fuck, all right, whatever. And so I was like, cool, like that's cool. Like if this is genuinely going to help me not think of my ex-wife while I'm on the river, then I am all for it. And then you said, okay, what else do you need? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, money. I need money. I said, like, because when you're down the bottom end of the continuum for a long time and you're in severe distress, depression, whatever, I'd run my business into the ground through lack of ability to process stuff. And then I'd ended up getting ready to go on this big adventure that was now sort of outside my realms of affordability. And she said, how much money do you need? And I said, $5,000. And you went, okay, well, we should probably double that then. We should probably get you $10,000. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, like, what do you mean? You're going to get me $10,000. Like, how the fuck are you going to get? Don't worry about it. All right. And a side note that I only remembered in the shower this morning was we talked about the fact that, I mean, it was literally only just after I'd had this traumatic breakup with my wife, and I'm like, I need a new wife. And you and I talked about that, and you made me write a list and put it in my wallet. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're fucking weird. But I did it. No, I didn't do it then. I went home, and you rang me when I was at home that night or text me and said, write your fucking list. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I did it that night. One of the other things you said was, when you were under, I cut the energetic ties with your wife. I'm like, what the fuck is the energetic ties with my wife? And you're like, well, we connected with people energetically, and I cut those. And one of the things that happens when you energetically cut the ties with somebody is that they will want to reconnect those ties. And I went, well, if you did that, there's no fucking way she's reconnecting. She has completely blamed me for everything. She doesn't want anything to do with me. Nah. And you're like, okay. And so then it's like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I'm going to go. And then as I'm leaving, you turned to me and you said, there's death on the river. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean there's death on the river? She said, and you said, it's not you. And I was like, I know it's fucking not me. I said, it's probably like a dead cow on the river or something like that. And you were like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, but I sense death on the river. I'm like, fucking whatever, woman. I'm out of here. You're weird. And I went home and I went, oh, all right, fucking, I need to get ready for this trip. And then I got that text from you that said, write the list. I went, oh, fuck. So I wrote the list and I put it in my wallet. And I woke up the next morning and there was a text message on my phone. And it was from my ex-wife. And it was the first time that she had contacted me since all of the chaos. And it said, like, I'm so sorry for the way this has ended up. I never meant to hurt you, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, holy fuck, that's weird. Mm. Like, I would never have expected that to come from her in any way, shape, or form, but it did. And I was like, that crazy woman said that that she would try and connect those energetic tie things. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's weird, but okay. And then it was lunchtime. It was about 12 o'clock, and I was out the front of my house, and I had a bus that my friend was going to drive along the route with me to help supply me with more lilos and food. And we were putting the stickers on the bus, and I got a phone call from a random number, and I answered it. And he's like, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm from the Mental Health Foundation. I know that the Mental Health Foundation has said that what you're doing is a stupid idea and they want nothing to do with it. But I think it's a great idea. I have my own department. I have my own series of funding and I can give you some money. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And I said, how much? He said, I've got 10 grand that I can give you. And I was just like, what the actual fuck is going on right now? And it turns out that that guy lost his job for doing that. And then the Mental Health Foundation really didn't like the fact. It was already in my bank account by the time they found out and didn't like it. And then they paid us more money to remove, not me, but the production company, they paid to digitally remove the stickers from the documentary at the end because the Mental Health Foundation are cunts.
Wow.
And so
you got even more.
Well, I didn't get it, but the production company got it. And
Nice.
And considering the whole thing was a gigantic success and drove a lot of people to seek help for their mental health. The CEO at the time was a fuckwit, not the Mental Health Foundation in general, but the CEO was a dickhead. And then to cap it all off, previous to capping it off, I spent 2 weeks on the river and didn't think of my ex-wife once while I was there. And then just to continue the weirdness was I got out of the river one day at Hamilton, and then I stayed in Hamilton that night, and it was a nighttime. I was like, I'm going out to a bar, and I'm going to sleep with somebody because all I wanted to do was go, if you're going to go sleep with someone, I'm going to go sleep with someone, because that's how you respond when someone cheats on you. And so I forgot that it was Hamilton, and I was going around and there wasn't much on offer. And then I saw this girl and she was really pretty, lots of tattoos, interesting looking. And I just bowled straight up to her. Hi, I'm Jimmy. This is what's going on. Hey. And it turns out that she was an evangelical Christian. And I was like, oh, do you know that I think that organized religion is the worst thing to ever happen to humanity? And she's like, oh, okay. And so we had this discussion about everything, and it was really interesting. And then at the end, she says, I got to go now. Well, it turns out she was engaged. And she said, I got to go now. But before I go, I would like to pray for you. And I was like, well, look, if you want to send out fucking happy thoughts to your God, the flying spaghetti monster, whatever, I don't care, like, go ahead. And she said, I pray for you. I pray for you to get more money. I'm like, well, thank you. that would be
Nice.
Lovely.
Yeah.
She said, I pray that you will find a woman that's much better suited for you than your ex-wife. I was like, yep, thank you. Appreciate that. And then she said, I pray for you to have strength when you find the dead body on the river. And I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about, woman? This is weird. And she said, did you not see? A couple of days ago, a boy died jumping off a bridge into the river. And he landed on his friend, and he kneed himself in the head, and he got pulled under, and they haven't been able to find him. So the Navy dive squad couldn't find him. The police dive squad couldn't find them. She said, but I think you're going to find him, and I pray for you to have the strength when you do. And now this was 2 people that had said there was death on the river. And I was like, oh, shit, this is weird. And then so a couple of days later, I woke up, and it was the day that I was going to go past where he had jumped off. And I got a call that morning on the river, and it was Dan, and he said, our friend Anita had been doing tarot cards that morning, and she said, don't tell Jimmy, but I think he's going to find that boy dead on the river. And he said, he called me and said, I'm going to tell him anyway. And so now I had 3 women tell me that I was going to find a dead body on the river. Long story long, I later that day came up around the bend, and on a sandbank in the middle of the river was this 14-year-old boy. And as I had seen him, there was a man coming out of the reeds on the side of the river with a tarpaulin, and he came over, walked into the river, and covered up the body. I swam up, and I said to the guy, hey, did you find this earlier, and have you come back? And he's like, no. He said, you won't believe me. And I said, well, bro, you're not going to fucking believe me because I got a crazier story. And he said, no, you don't. He said, I was just sitting on my couch at home. He said, I'm the boy's uncle. He said, I was just sitting on the couch at home, and two Maori spiritual women who I don't know knocked on the door and said, the river is ready to release the boy.
Wow.
Please go down and pick him up. He will be around this area. And so the guy went, oh, okay. And he got in his car and went, oh shit, I better grab the tarpaulin, came down, and him and I ended up there at a similar time. And so in total, there were 5 women who had told the pair of us that we were going to come across this boy, this dead body on the river. And that, for me, again, I don't really tell the story at all, but that for me was the catalyst for my sort of spiritual evolvement, in that I now understood that there must be something bigger and more than I can see that's in front of me and is explained to me by normal scientific methods. And that was the catalyst for my journey onward of where I'm at now, someone who straddles the scientific world and the spiritual esoteric world to much to my own benefit, and I think the benefit of others.
Wow,
so that's the very long how I met you story.
Well, okay, let me tell my version now. So, yes, we have a mutual friend, Dan, and he had told me about you and what had happened. You had the split up with your wife and that you were quite depressed, and he was very worried about, you'd come up with this idea to lilo, or as we call them, I guess it's floaties. Do we call them or air mattresses in the States? Down the Waikato River, which is like this, a raging river. It's not just a little creek that you float by. It's huge. And I was like, oh, fuck, that's pretty nuts. And he said, yeah, we think it might be a death wish and that he's doing this, but really he doesn't give a fuck and he wants to die. And I was like, well, I'll see him. And I really didn't have any time, but I did. So I thought, right, I'll see you at the end of the day.
That's why you fitted me in way late one night.
Yeah. And you came and you were like, I don't know what the fuck I'm here, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And when I saw you, I realized that I had seen you before. And do you, I don't know if you remember.
We did talk about this. I remember this now. Yeah, I completely forgot about this.
That I was at this party one time, and it was this beautiful house, and there's all these beautiful people at the party, and I'm with this guy I've been dating recently who's a bit uptight, and suddenly, like, 6 naked girls or semi-naked girls come marching out and go into the hot tub with one guy, and that one guy was you. I was like, and then suddenly everybody's starting to take off their clothes, and I realized this is a swingers party. And so I'm like, cool, let's just stay and watch. And the guy who I was with was like, no, we're getting out of here immediately, and this is, what the fuck is this? And he just freaked out, and I was like, I was like, cool, I just want to check it out. And so as we're walking down, this girl in the hot tub is like, come here. And she's like trying to convince me to get in the hot tub. And then she starts going on about how she lost twin babies or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm not getting naked with a girl because now I just want to give you therapy.
Yeah.
And so, but I remembered you were sitting there watching this conversation in the spa with all these naked chicks and didn't really think anything about it. But when you walked my office, I was like, I know you. You're the dude with all the naked girls. So I guess we hadn't formally met, but I had seen you.
You had seen.
I had seen you. And I remember we doing the session, you were very like, this is bullshit. I don't really know why I'm here, but I'm just going to go with it. And to correct some of the things you said, not to correct it, but
no. But that was my version that I remember in my head. Absolutely.
I don't say I cut the cords, or maybe I did at that point. It's entirely possible. But my whole purpose with hypnotherapy is like guiding you through doing these different things, right? Of like making these changes. It was pretty funny. You were definitely like, this is bullshit, but at the same time, I'm not going to be a complete asshole.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't really want to be there. It wasn't something that I had chosen to do. I was made to go by somebody else, which changes the energetic dynamic of a relationship like that.
It does. But I just thought, well, I'll give it a crack because I didn't want you to die. I work with a lot of suicidal people. So I thought, well, I'll help him out because Dan was quite concerned. But everything else you said was correct. But just with the whole, I guess what I did with your ex-wife was I do that technique where you see a screen and all the memories, whatever memories you want to forget. You add in monkeys and cartoon characters and circus music and you do all this. It's called the rewind technique. And it's really good for getting rid of phobias, but also of like repetitive patterns, right? And when you go through a breakup, you're going to think about those things over and over and you play it over in your mind and it drives you fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So when you came back and your trip was successful and it was all good and you were still alive, so that was great.
Yeah.
I remember you saying, I think we started like kind of going out. We had like mutual friends, and so all of us would go out in a big group and you're like, I just want a new girlfriend, I want a new wife. And I'm like, well, you made your list. And I was like, well, you need to go and like find someone. And you were like, no, I don't want to go and find someone. It's this bullshit. But you did.
Yeah.
I remember you went on one date and you were not impressed.
Yeah. So find someone, the website, because with Dan, I was writing some articles around dating. And so I'd gone to do different things. And then it was Dan that was telling me to go on, find someone and date that way.
Yeah.
And so I went on some pretty average dates. So some pretty funny dates that ended up in some quite strange situations. But yeah, then it was only, I think it was about like 2 months after I met you for the first time that I met Libby on Find Someone. Mm-hmm. And she was, as far as I remember, like everything that was on my list. Mm. And it was really like exciting. I was like, this one could be. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you know this, but I told her about the list about a month later, and she laughed really hard and said, I have a list as well in my wallet. And we both had lists in our wallets, and they were the same. But the first date that I went on with Libby, I sort of planned quite a elaborate date, because if I'm going to date, I want to win dates. And so Anita and I had made up these sort of this fun game, which was part of it. But I'm not much of a thinker, a planner, and we had decided to go out for a date on Good Friday, and everything is closed on Good Friday. And we were going to go for this, I was going to do a picnic out at Piha, and I went to the supermarket to buy food, and they're like, it's Good Friday, you dumb shit, we're not open. And I was like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. And I went around to your house, mm-hmm. and you're like, well, we're having Mexican for dinner. And you made me salsa, guacamole, and I took some corn chips. Yeah. And then I went round to my mum's place and I stole dessert out of her freezer. And then I went to the service station and bought some water. And that was my picnic. Yeah. And Libby and I, on our podcast, every third episode of my podcast is Libby and I talking about our relationship and relationship issues. And we talked about our first date. And by the way, I will pass the compliment back. She reminisced on how much she enjoyed the guacamole and salsa, and it was really nice. So you were definitely a catalyst for me getting a second date with my now new wife. Way better than the last one. Thanks for asking. We've been together, almost 10 years.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So, don't believe in manifestation, huh? Because I think I said the word manifestation. You're like, I don't believe in that bullshit.
Yeah. Probably. And I absolutely didn't. And I don't know if I still believe in manifestation. Well, I don't believe in the way it's portrayed in the New Age realm completely. But I very, very, very much believe in energy and how it can be manipulated, moved, changed, created. And so, I'm just not basically not the secret sort of bullshit. Not the, well, I think, we talked about this before very quickly, which is you can't just say, I want to be a movie star, and then you'll magically become, there's no manifesting that will make you a fucking movie star. What there is putting it out there energetically and then going and doing the fucking work to make it a reality. Because manifesting will only amplify what you're doing. It will not create what you're doing.
Exactly. And that's where most people get it wrong. And that's what I always tell people is now listen to when you get that nudge, when you get that feeling to go do something or take that class or go somewhere or go on that site, do it. Because that's when people miss it.
Yeah, it points you in the right direction.
Yeah, it still takes hard work.
You can write as many fucking lists as you want about your perfect partner, but then if you don't go and date, you ain't going to find them. Exactly.
So then you did quite a few other things after that, after the lilo.
Yeah, well, you met me at what was a tipping point for my life. So, you met me just after the tipping point. The tipping point was a couple of months before I met you. I met a guy called Dr. John McEwen, who is a psychologist and counselor. And he was the exact tipping point of my life, as in everything before I went into him was going downhill. And then when I walked out of his office, he didn't fix everything, obviously, but he turned the corner for me so that I could start going back uphill. And then my journey since that day has been about trying to move myself up the mental fitness continuum 1% at a time. That's it. Just one little bit every day. And if you keep taking those small singular steps over time, it's called the aggregation of marginal gains, and it is exponential. So it doesn't just add up, it's growth on growth. And what the best math for that is, because we don't quite understand compound interest. So 1% better every day. So 1% is 1.01. That's you as a whole, 1, and then 1%. And then if you do that 1% every day for 365 days a year, it doesn't just add up to 3.65. It is exponential. 1.01 to 365 is 37.8. You're 37.8 times different at the end of the year if you're only doing 1% every day. And so that's been my journey for the last 10 years. What can I do to be 1% better today? And I'll find that in anything. And so from previous to you, I will only find that in these couple of particular places. And now I will find that in anywhere I can possibly get it. I don't care how crazy it is or how, unbelievable it is or how scientifically proven it is. I will try it, and if it can make me 1% better, then I'm all in for it.
Cool. So he gave you some really good tips on your mental health and serotonin. Do you want to share some of those? Because they're not the typical.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, serotonin has nothing to do with your mental health. I literally recorded another podcast today with Professor Grant Schofield about how wrong we got that and how it can now be different. Lost Connections is the best book by Johann Hari to read in regards to that, or The Emperor's New Drugs. Very, very, very good in that regard. But what he did to me, this guy, Dr. John McEwen, was he kind of bridged the gap between what we typically do in mental health, which is separate the physiological from the psychological, and that they're two separate things. The physiological is the scientist saying, here, take a drug. This will fix your neurochemical makeup. And then the psychological is, here, talk about your feelings, and that'll fix everything. And we sort of, never the twain shall meet, keep them separate. And the way forward and the way so much of the new research is going is that, it's obviously all intertwined. And so one of the things that was so, it's about taking control of where you're at and being radically responsible for your own well-being. And he asked me questions that I really hadn't had. I'd been to 5 psychologists before him who hadn't been able to help me. And he said to me just real simple things, which was like, he said, how much water do you drink? I was like, none. He's like, what do you mean none? I was like, none. He said, well, what do you drink? I said, well, fuck everything else. And he's like, well, okay. And after 15 minutes of being with me, he knew that just telling me what to do wasn't gonna make any change.
Yeah.
And so he said to me, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you why you should do it. And he said, cortisol, it's your stress hormone. Anxiety, depression, it ramps up, but just sitting in your chair for 8 hours, it builds up. And he said there are 2 main ways you can get rid of cortisol out of your body. He said one is that you can cry it out. And I'm like, fuck yeah, that's me. I cry it out a lot. And he said, well, the other main way that you can get it out is that you can pee it out. Right? And I said, okay. And he said, so now you know that you have 2 choices. Do you choose to pee it out or cry it out? I thought, fuck. Well, fucking pee it out. He's like, yeah, cool. Drink 2 liters of water a day. I'm like, well, fuck. Okay, sure. And so from that day, I have drunk 2 liters of water a day. Now, drinking 2 liters of water a day is not going to magically change your life. It's not going to fix all of your problems. But I'll tell you what, it's a fucking piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
And this is the problem. And I mean, we've talked about the fact that, people will come into you for hypnotherapy and go, make me change this behavior through hypnotherapy, and then everything else will be fine. Fuck off. It will not. It does not work like that. I've been doing this 10 years now, and I'm yet to find 2 people who have the same, prescription to get better.
Yeah, definitely.
It requires you finding out all of the different little pieces of the puzzle and putting them all together yourself over time.
Yeah.
There is no fix me in a weekend, in a retreat, in a session. Yeah. Healing takes time, because what you'll do is you'll heal a part, keep working on it, and then discover a whole new fucking part.
Yeah.
Like I'm 1% every day for 10 years now, and yesterday I found a whole big piece of the puzzle that I now need to figure out. And it, and you're like, cool. But if you told me this piece of the puzzle 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. It wouldn't have been part of my healing journey. It wouldn't have been something I could have comprehended or done. But now, 10 years down the track, now I'm ready to deal with that. And when I deal with that, it will help me move forward.
Because you got to build that foundation, right? Otherwise, it just knocks you over.
Yeah, you've got to have particular levels of mental fitness to be able to deal with particular problems.
So you've written 2 books now.
I have written 3 books now.
Oh, 3 books. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm in your first one, and I'm called Caroline the Crazy Crazy Lady.
Correct. You are my original crazy lady. And it's interesting because, and I still, if I met you today, there is no way in hell I'd describe you as the crazy lady. But in the context of my life, I had a series of crazy ladies that changed the course of my understanding of how the world works. And you were one of those pieces of the puzzle. And so I have multiple crazy ladies that have pointed me in different directions over time. And I'm now eternally grateful for all of them.
Oh, that's cool. So you've written 3 books. The first one is a little bit mental. Second one...
it's called, A Bit Mental.
A Bit Mental, sorry.
Yep. The second one is called A Guide to Live More Awesome. Mm-hmm. And the third one is called Inside Out.
Cool. I'll have to, maybe I've read the first 2. I'll have to get the third one.
I'll send you a third one.
Cool.
Yeah, so my third book came out in October last year. So it's relatively newish.
Yeah. Well needed at this point in time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting when you write books, and especially when you write books like me, is that you write them from the place you are at the time.
Yeah. So
when I look at A Bit Mental, for example, so I did the Lilo adventure, and then maybe 6-8 months later, I got approached by a big publisher, and they came and said, "We want you to write a book." And I was like, "No." And then they came back again and said, "We'd still like you to write a book." And I was like, "No." And they came back a third time. And I went, "Oh, maybe," because I'm not a fucking writer. I've never written more than 1,000 words in my life. At school, when they force you to do a 1,000-word essay, it's the most I'd ever written. And this woman said, "Look, I think your story's really good. I think it would help people. We would like you to write a memoir." Like, what the fuck do you mean a memoir? Write the story of your life. And at the time, I think, what was I? I was like, I'm 30. Well, maybe I was 31. I was like, I don't need to write a memoir. She's like, "Yeah, please." And the catalyst for me finally doing it was twofold. One, she said to me was, she said, "Do not read anything about how to write." She said, "Just write like you speak. You tell stories so well verbally, just write them down that way." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And that one piece of advice from that one woman has become my signature. And people love my writing because it sounds like I'm talking to them in a nice, normal, conversational, friendly way. And that's probably the biggest piece of feedback I get from my writing. And the second was I went back and she said it needs to be between 60 and 65,000 words. And I'm like, fuck, like 1,000 words, the most I've ever written at one time. And I went back home and I just started writing story titles of all the things that the stories that I have that I could tell about this. And then when I finished writing them all down, I counted them up and there were 63 of them.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I can't write 60 to 65,000 words, but I can write 63,000 word stories. And so that was the catalyst for me to go, yes, okay, I'll write my book. And so when I look back at that book now, I'm like, the writing isn't as good as I am now, obviously. So I think the writing is shit. I look at it and I'm like, the thinking is so small and small-minded. And I'm like, oh. And so I'm am I proud of that book? No, I don't like that book. I don't like what I wrote. And then I constantly get people sending me messages going, I love your book. It helped me. It changed me. It was the catalyst for my recovery. It was all of these things. I'm just like, what are you people reading? Like, what is going on? And it took me a while to understand that I'm connecting with people where they are at, because that was where I was at. And then my second book is the same. Like, I still think it's pretty helpful, but I'm like, my third book's way better. Like, my latest book's the best book. That's because that's my thinking now.
Yeah.
But even my book from last October, like the amount of thinking I've done between October last year and now, I'm like, I'd like to update all of that stuff. But it still helps people constantly because it meets them where they're at. And I think that's really important for people to understand, is that when you share your story in written form or verbally, it doesn't need to be all things to all people. It will hit the people it needs to hit, and it may just change their lives.
That's such good advice. It's so true. I've written a book, and I don't know, when did I write it? 2015, 16? And I was just saying last night, God, I need to rewrite that book. It's so shit now. And then I've written so many other things since then, not in book form, but like I started a school and I've written a whole like 1,200-page manual and all of that. So I just keep doing the next thing. But I think that's the thing, is people get so tied up in perfectionism that they don't even let that one thing out. I know there's all kinds of shit I'd want to change in that first book, but I go, well, I'm doing all this other stuff too, so I'll get to that later. But I know people who've been writing a book for 10 years and they still haven't published it or showed it to anybody. And it's that you will look back and think that sucks, but someone else might think it's great.
Yeah, well, that's just it. It'll get the people it's supposed to get to. Yeah, it might not become a New York Times bestseller, but it will hit the people that it needs to hit. And like, I think that's one of the key things in the creative process in general, is like, just let it go. Just put it out there. And maybe your book is fucking 24 chapters of shit and one chapter of pure brilliance, and someone picks out that one chapter. That chapter gets turned into a movie. That chapter gets turned into a documentary. That chapter gets turned into a New York Times article that then changes millions of people.
Exactly.
But it only came out because you released the shit book.
Or inspire someone else to write a bestseller that's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Have you read, what's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic?
I have not.
It's really good, but part of the premise of that book, it talks about creativity and that process of creating and writing and creating art. And she talks about how she believes that ideas are their own energy.
Yeah.
And they come and tap you on the head and they're like, hey, do you want to give birth to me? Do you want to bring me into the world? And you might go yes, and you might go no. And then it goes and taps somebody else. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting concept. Yeah,
I kind of believe in that. Like, I kind of believe that ideas just come from the ether. Like, and this one of the things about the creative people is you actually need to get quiet in order to get creative.
Yes.
The quieter you get, the more the ideas have space to turn up.
Exactly. But we have so much noise and distraction these days.
Everything is noise and distraction.
Yeah.
This podcast you're listening to is noise and distraction from what you should be actually doing.
So do that after you listen to the podcast.
But thanks for listening.
So you and Libby got married, and then you moved to Mexico.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, we're not technically married.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the sort of the interesting quirks of our involvement, is that both of us realized that we didn't actually want to be married again. We had a wedding, a very, very unconventional one. It was a surprise wedding. Nobody knew that it was a wedding that they came to. And then the super surprise was that Libby didn't know it was a wedding either. And she also wasn't engaged at the time. So she got engaged and married on the same day. And basically I was the only one that knew. That was the point.
That's so you.
Yeah, it's a good video. It's a great story, but it's a long one. But neither of us, we're not legally married. We never went to the Auckland District Court to sign the papers or anything like that. Legally, we get the same protections because we're in a de facto relationship, but we just didn't need that. And one of the things, and this is a short side story, is one of the things that we did not promise in our vows to be together forever. Both of us had previously been married. Both of us had promised to be with this person forever, and both of us had those people then be unfaithful to us. And so instead of promising to be together forever, every single day since we have been married, the first thing we say to each other each morning is, I say, "Good morning, Libby Grace. My soul chooses to be with you today. I do not choose her tomorrow. I will make that decision tomorrow." And so we only choose each other for each day. And tomorrow, maybe our souls need to go in different directions. Maybe. Who knows? But to claim an absolute is just silly because we do not know whether we will be together forever. And so we just promise each other every day. And I mean, the Mexico thing's a long story, very short. We both hate the cold. And so we used to get away every winter, and then those getaways got longer and longer. And then we found a magic little place called Puerto Escondido in Oaxaca, Mexico, where life is easy and simple and cheap, and the food's great, the people are great, the surf is one of the best beach breaks in the world, and we just decided to hole up there, and that's where we will spend pretty much the rest of our days. And the cool thing is Amazon delivers to our door from America, so anything we need can turn up. Nice. And it just allows me to write, to think, and the internet allows me to connect with anyone around the world. And then pre-crazy global pandemic, I used to fly around and talk to people in different countries and things like that. But now that's a bit harder, so just changing it up a little.
So Libby's still in Mexico now?
Yep. So I'm back in New Zealand right now. I have spent the last few months delivering content mainly to corporates around New Zealand. And on October the 3rd, I go back to Mexico. This is the longest we've been apart. It's not fun, but we're pretty solid and life is all good. So we've dealt with it just fine, but not in a hurry to spend 6 months away from my wife again. Yeah.
So you're going back?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my world, my life, my favorite person, all my possessions and all of my things are in Puerto Escondido. So that's where I live these days.
And do you speak Spanish?
Very poorly. One of the things that's been really hard, and it was something I only figured out after the Dyslexic Foundation of New Zealand asked me to be on their podcast, and I only found out after doing that podcast that I'm mildly dyslexic, and it really one of the things, because we were talking about languages, and it's really, really, really hard for me to learn a new language, and I just can't comprehend or remember any of it. And so my wife and I have been, we've been there for almost 5 years now, and she speaks fluent Spanish and I speak fuck all. And it hurts me. I've cried about it many times. I've tried every different way to try and learn it. And it's just made it very, 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 very hard. But it's also a catalyst for growth in all sorts of areas. So it's been good and bad.
That's interesting you say that, because I'm mildly dyslexic as well, and I am terrible with languages.
Yeah, apparently that's one of the things. People with this just can't learn languages.
But it's funny, like I took 6 years of French in school, which was stupid. I should have taken Spanish, but that's another topic. And
Yeah. I took French in school.
Could never speak it. Not
18%. School C French. 18, 1-8.
That was your grade?
And I tried.
Yeah, it's such a hard language. The whole feminine and masculine pronouns, and I don't know.
Well, Spanish has that too.
I know, exactly. But it's interesting. I think I have my headphones in the wrong ears talking about
Well, it was
dyslexic.
actually, to go back to another thing that you did on the first day that we met was, I don't know the name for it or anything, but it's like that tapping thing on your wrist.
Kinesiology.
Yes.
Yeah, muscle testing.
Yes. And you did that, and I think we were doing it to try and find the origin of my depression. And basically the conclusion I think you came to was I've had a lot of concussions in my life. And it was, I think, one of the big ones of those, which is what the catalyst for my depression was. And then on my podcast that I recorded today with Professor Grant Schofield, we were talking about glutamate and its place in inflammation regarding depression. And when you have a traumatic brain injury, a dying cell lets out like 1,600 times the amount of glutamate, and then you get glutamate toxicity, which then I'm trying to remember what he told me literally an hour ago. And so basically the point was that head injuries, traumatic brain injuries, basically dump glutamate in your brain, which increases inflammation and can cause poor mental health. And so you helped me with that, just to understand where that came from, possibly.
Because I've had quite a few concussions as well. And I also I have epilepsy from a massive car accident, which is very much under control unless I have MSG, which is the G is...
He talked about MSG today.
Glutamate. And so I will that's when I have a seizure, is if I have MSG. And it's fucking annoying because MSG is in everything.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. No, he talked about that today, MSG, yeah.
I've had doctors laugh in my face about that and say that's not true. And like all of China has that in the Middle East, they dump it into all their food. That's not the cause of your epilepsy. It's because you had an head injury. And I'm like, I only have a fucking seizure if I have MSG. And they're like,
right. Well, you need to talk to Professor Grant Schofield. He knows all about that shit.
Oh, well, I should interview him as well. Because doctors don't seem to know anything about it and just tell me, oh, no, you need to take the medication. And I don't want to take the fucking medication because it makes me feel completely spaced out and dopey. And I never have it unless I have that in my food. So it's...
So this is what we're talking about today, which is the disconnect between the physiological and the psychological. And so these doctors are like, no, it's just take these pills. It fixes these things. And he's talking about this holistic way where, what we eat literally affects our brain chemistry, our inflammation, and things like fucking epilepsy.
Yeah. And but they just don't, like you said, they don't want to look at it. It's not taught in medical mainstream med schools and all of that. You really have to do much more research to find out about that stuff. But, well, I'm so glad to hear that he's talking about that because most people look at me like I've grown two heads and go, oh, Jesus, you're just one of those
the problem with the modern Western medical system is specialization. It's both the problem and the thing that's made it absolutely fucking phenomenal. The fact that we have specialized so much that allows us to be able to go in and fix valves in a heart when you go in through your fucking leg, and like it's phenomenal. It is magic. It is unbelievable. But when you specialize, like my friend's a very, very, very good physio, and he's more holistic than anything in the way that he works. You go in for a bad back, and he's like, meh. Okay, I'll give you a specific example. I went in for tennis elbow because I play a lot of tennis. And he's like, nothing wrong with your elbow. I'm like, fuck, there is. Everything wrong with my elbow. It's like I play tennis and my elbow fucking hurts. And he said, no. He said, it's the way you sit. And I was like, what? And the way I sit, I spend too much time working from my bed, and the angle of my neck is pinching nerves in the side of my neck and my shoulder, and then that goes down into my elbow and my forearm. And then when I happen to play tennis, I feel it more than others. And so now, if I have a sore elbow from tennis, it is 100% because I'm like, fuck, I've been sitting on my bed that way. That's exactly why it is. And so, but anyone else with a sore elbow would go to an elbow specialist. And so you go to an elbow specialist, oh, this is the problem with the elbow. They'll never look any further than that. And that's the way our medical system works for all of our problems. If you have epilepsy, you go to an epilepsy specialist when it's actually the dietitian that could fix it for you.
Yeah.
You know, you go to a psychologist when it's actually a fucking, a fitness trainer that could fix that part of it for you, or a life coach that could fix that part for you, or a relationship coach that could fix that part for you. We've got to start looking at the human experience from a far more holistic view. And people don't like the term holistic, but it just means by looking at all angles, the whole of it.
Yeah,
Not that you have to bloody sniff some essential oils.
Though that seems to be all the rage now. That fixes everything, apparently.
Yep.
But hey, I think it all has its place, doesn't it?
Well, that's exactly it.
That's so... Yeah, you know what really helped me with because I had a traumatic brain injury from a head-on car collision, my fault. And I had impulsive rage. Like, it really changed my personality. I would go around and try to beat anybody up who did anything mean to anybody else. I suddenly became the watchdog and would try to fight people on the street. And not so good when you're a 5'2" female. But I had this massive tantrum. I was a hairdresser at the time, and I saw the salon owner really picking on this other, quite a junior staff member. And I was like, "Ooh, you want to fucking pick on somebody?" I put my scissors down, and I'm like, "Let's go, motherfucker!" And he's just like, "What?" And I said, "You want to fucking pick on?" And I'm chasing him. I still have a bad limp at this point. I chase him in the back room, and I'm banging on the door. I'm like, "Come out like a fucking man!" And then, so he locked himself in there, wouldn't come out. So then I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I should go back and finish cutting this guy's hair. So I start cutting the guy's hair, and he's like, have you had a bad accident? And I'm like, oh, yeah, can you tell by my limp? And he's like, no, I can tell by your behavior. And he's like,
right,
I'm a cranial osteopath. I could really help you. Here's my card. And so he gives me his card, and I'm like, oh, fuck, why not? And so I go along, and literally 2 sessions of him just putting his hands on my head, and my impulsive rage completely went away. Well, maybe not completely, but it was amazing.
That's brilliant, though.
And it helped with the epilepsy and all of that, and my limp was gone after 4 sessions with him. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But... yeah, but you tell my grandfather was a doctor, and I told him that's what fixed me, and he just about had an aneurysm when I said that, because he was like, osteopaths do not know what they're talking about, and just mainstream medicine really doesn't want to acknowledge that type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I went to a craniosacral therapist recently who did nothing for me except change my life.
Oh, is that all?
And so... and what was interesting was that it was a passing comment as I was leaving. And so here's where the viewers are like, okay, this is fucking weird. I've gone from militant atheist to right at the other end of the spectrum. And so I've had a voice speaking to me for about 7 or 8 years. And it started by yelling at me. Mm. And I'm like, this is fucking weird. I'm schizophrenic. This is fucking weird, strange. I don't understand it. And it was just angry with me for forever. And I couldn't figure out why. And it just seemed bored with me. It seemed angry with me. And it was trying to talk to me. And I just didn't quite understand it. And then as I'm leaving this craniosacral session, she says to me, have you ever done automatic writing? And I was like, no. Basically I kind of know what it is. You just You just grab a pen and paper and just write. Stream of consciousness. It doesn't need to make sense. You just write. And she's like, yeah. She said, I have a feeling that you should try that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I went home and I got a diary and a pen, and I just started, this is automatic writing. I'm just writing a whole, and then this voice started talking to me perfectly. Mm-hmm. And he'd just been waiting for the right. Well, he'd been waiting for a long time. I needed to figure out the right way to actually be able to talk to him. Mm. And apparently it was through automatic writing, not listening, not meditating, not any of these things, but automatic writing. And so now him and I can sit down and have these conversations, and he tells me stuff and helps me stuff and points me in the right direction and gives me advice. And I have a relationship with this fucking weird voice that you're like, is this me? Am I just talking to myself, or is this coming through from somewhere else? Who the fuck knows?
So you don't know?
Crazy, eh?
Do you know who the voice is?
I know where it's... Yeah, I know who the voice is.
Who is it? Is it Jesus?
And what's interesting is that, I'm, as I said earlier, I think organized religion is the worst thing to happen to humanity. I think Christianity is the worst of them all. And this guy's like the 11th person in the Bible from the planet, a guy called Enoch.
Oh. Well,
he's the only human never to have died. He was picked up by God and taken to become the scribe of this is all from the Old Testament. This is all the Christian mysticism. He was chosen by God. He was picked off the earth. He was turned into the archangel Metatron. He sits at the right hand of God, and he is the scribe of the universe. He was a scribe on earth. He's a scribe in the metaphysical world now. No fucking wonder he wants to talk to me through writing.
You need to meet my friend Ellie. Because apparently Enoch is working with her too.
Yeah, sure, he works with lots of people.
And I have a book that I paid a fortune for this book. I walked into some years
The Book
and years
of Enoch?
ago. Yeah. You know the book?
Yeah.
I just had to have this book. I think I read it years ago, but I know exactly I know who you're talking about. And so Ellie is a naturopath who taught me kinesiology, and I went to her as a client. The story I have, how I met her, was fucking insane. I had this dream. People kept telling me I should go to her. I finally make an appointment. I'm thinking naturopath, right? She's just going to tell me to take some vitamins, change my diet. I think
some essential oils, please.
Yeah. I think she was the first one who said I shouldn't be having MSG, actually. She was the one who pinpointed that. But the night before I went to see her, I'm like sleeping and I wake up and there's this fucking dude standing by the side of the bed. And I would have thought it was an intruder if he hadn't have been like, he looked like an Amazonian rainforest dude, right? He's wearing a loincloth and he's got like shit painted on his face, and it's the weirdest shit you've ever seen. And I was like, ugh. And he's staring at my husband. And I was like, okay, I'm fucking dreaming, right? And you rub your eyes and I'm dreaming. And then he's looking at me and I'm like, holy fuck. So I put the blanket over my head and I'm like, you're dreaming, just go back to sleep. And I managed to, but I never put that sheet over my head back down. And the next day I was like, fuck, that was a weird dream. And I go to this appointment with this woman, Ellie, who is also connected with Enoch. And she opens the door and she looks at me and she goes, who's your friend? And I was like, what? And she's like, who's your friend? There's like some Amazonian dude standing next to you, like in a loincloth. And I literally almost fell down. Like my legs almost went out from under me. Yeah. And she like drags me inside and I was like, what the fuck? And she was like, oh, sorry. Does that freak you out? Yeah, here, I'll talk to him. Hang on, let me see what he wants. So she's like, she's like, oh, he's your husband's spirit guide. And he's been trying to like get connected with him, but your husband's ignoring him. So he was trying to connect with him and you saw him. And he's like, ooh, that's cool. And so now he's following you around. That's all. And I was like, well, I don't, what does he want? And she's like, nah, he doesn't really want anything with you, but you give him a job. And I was like, okay, we'll keep bad people away or something like that. But yeah, it was fucking weird.
So it was the first day that I heard from Enoch. Libby was downstairs at breakfast, and I was walking down the stairs, and she looked up at me and she screamed, and I was like, "What the fuck are you going on about?" Yeah. And she screamed at me, and I said, "What?" She said, "You're 800 years old." And I said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" She said, "You look like the oldest man I've ever seen in my entire life. You look like you're 800 years old."
You're like, thanks, babe.
And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm coming downstairs and having some breakfast. And we sat at the table having breakfast, and I just heard this massive booming voice say, "Enoch." And I went, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "No." And I said, "What the fuck is an Enoch?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, that just got yelled at me." And so I went and Googled it, and like the way that the Old Testament is, however they counted time or however time worked back then, like he was taken when he was like 800. And so I was like, that's really strange. And then I didn't talk to him or connect to him for a long time after that. But that was the first time when she saw him.
Wow.
Like as part of me.
So do you feel, so I used to do meditation groups with this woman, Ellie. She like picked certain ones of us who could channel as well or whatever and go along, and I would listen to Enoch talking. He's quite opinionated.
Yeah. He's quite dismissive. He doesn't suffer fools. No. He's what you imagine like the 11th man on earth to be, like a misogynist dick. Yeah. But he's very wise. And one of the things that he has taught me in regards to the way that we work is that this is a relationship. And so it's not channeling as in he tells me what to say. It's like me and him have a conversation and we go back and forth, and we can disagree on things, and we can expand on things. We can talk about all of these different aspects of it. And the more we form a relationship, the more we open up to each other. So the better friendship we have, the more he'll tell me. And he just like, and because I mean, from where I've come from, I don't believe any of this, even whilst I'm doing it. And so I'm being a dick, and I'm going like prove it to me, like prove I'm not just talking to myself. Yeah. And he's like, that's not how friendships work. We don't demand that from people we're trying to become friends with. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then I was asking, like, Libby and I had a disagreement about something, like not a fight per se, but we just disagreed about something. And so he said, go sit under the lemon tree to write. And so I went, okay. And so I went outside and I sat under the lemon tree, and we were just writing. And he said, because I had reacted too quickly to something that Libby had said. And he said to me, the distance between thoughts and actions is wisdom. And I was like, I like that. Well, because like the more we can train that distance, the more wisdom we have for a situation. I was like, that's a good quote. I like that. And then when I finished chatting to him, I was like, I heard that somewhere. I saw that on Instagram. I read that. And so I went and Googled all over the place for that and variations of that. And I couldn't find anything in regards to anything like that. And so I was like, holy shit. Like that was an original, in air quotes, that was an original thought. That was something that had come to me from the ether, from whoever, wherever, whatever, but now it came out through my pen. And so I was like, I would never have thought of that if I'd tried to sit down and think of it. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm listening now. That's good. That helps me.
I've heard that exact phrase.
Have you?
From that woman channeling. I am not fucking, and it was at me because I'm like fucking covered in goose pimples right now.
Fucking ridiculous.
I have goose pimples all over. Because I started fucking laughing when she did it. I was laughing because it was like this, like she's trying to, because she would talk through it and be like, it would be all weird. And I started fucking laughing and I couldn't stop. And that's what it said. And it came real clear and said that and was like, you need to work on your wisdom. And I was like, fuck. Okay. That's why I say he's opinionated. That's the weirdest shit I've ever fucking heard right now. Well, maybe not the weirdest, but fuck me, Jimmy. You got yeah. I don't even know what to say now. That's fucking nuts.
Ridiculous. But and this comes back to me. It's like
I took it as a diss.
Sorry?
Yeah. I took it as a diss to me.
Yeah.
That I was an idiot. Yeah. Anyways.
And so this is where, like, I ask the questions is like, how the fuck does this work? Like, I'm sitting here trying to think if it's just me talking to myself, and then you tell me you've heard it before. I'm like, and I was sure you were about to say, oh, I've heard that before from the Dalai Lama, or I read it on Instagram or something like that. And I really felt that you were about to like discredit me in the way that, and then you're like, oh no, I've heard it from him. Like, what the actual fuck? Isn't that what your podcast is called? What the fuck?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, what the actual
stories.
Fuck? So this is a question that Libby, my wife, asked me. She was far more on board with the weird shit than I was. And so this journey that I've been taking along with this, and one of the things that she asked me, which really, really made a difference in my life, was how many coincidences until it's no longer a coincidence? And for me, the answer was about 473.
Yeah.
Like, no, I need another one. No, I need another one. No, still don't believe you, I need another one. And it took so fucking many for me to go, okay, there's something weird going on here. There's something a little bit strange that I don't understand. And now I'm at a place where I cannot discredit fucking anything. Like, nothing. Nothing.
No.
It's insane.
It is.
From someone that came from militant atheist to, right. So I actually went from believing in zero gods, so as in militant atheist, to now I kind of I can describe myself as an omnist, and an omnist is someone who believes in every god. Yeah. So I believe in the Christian God, the Muslim God, the Viking gods, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the indigenous gods. I believe in every single god because I believe that if people got together and felt a similar truth enough to create something, then there was probably something there. Yeah. And if there's something there that could teach me and give me my 1%, oh, I'm taking it.
That's the thing. It's like, how many does it take? because it'll just happen over and over. I mean, it sounds like you're working with him, because I work with a lot of people who are schizophrenic, who hear voices, and I've heard them myself. And there's a certain type of work I do that's called parts therapy, where you hypnotize people and then you go, well, there's a part of you that wants to keep smoking, or there's a part of you that, like, I'll give you an example. I had a client of mine calls me and he said, I really need you to see my teenage son. He's losing time, as he called it. And he'll wake up in the middle of the night, he'll come to in the middle of the night and he's like stolen my car and driven to Hamilton or something. And he just like suddenly is aware, that has no memory of doing any of this stuff, but then like realizes he's in Hamilton and he's done all this stuff. And he's like, what the fuck? And so I did this technique. So there's part of you that's like stealing the car at night. And I'm thinking, you're just a teenager making shit up, right? You know exactly what you're doing. But this other voice starts talking through this kid. And he's like, what do you want, bitch? And I'm like, what? And said his name was John, and he was a cop, and he was killed. And that the kid happened to be at the hospital where he died. And he was like a crooked cop or something. It was fucking weird. But anyways, he was like claiming to steal the car. And the kid's face would change. The voice would change. It was fucking nuts. But
like a position.
Like an attachment. But they also... So I've worked with tons of people that have this. And a lot of times it's suicidal. And they'll keep having this voice telling them they should die and they should kill themselves. And when you do this therapy...
Yeah.
It's like it's this voice or this part, and I don't know if it really is something else or if it is a part of their dissociated part of their personality, but it'll say, oh, well, I died. I'm somehow attached to this person. I want to die. Like, I don't want to live this like teenage kid's life. This is fucking boring. So I want them to kill themselves because it's the only way I know to pass over. So you just do some stuff to get that thing to detach and not there, and the voice goes away. So then the psychiatrists are like, ooh, let's just send you lots of people because you're like helping cure the schizophrenia. But then it was just like, it gets freaky. So
yeah, there's some deep, crazy stuff in there.
But this voice sounds okay.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is like when, and I am by no means any expert in any realm anywhere close to this, but when you talk to something else that you are not just thinking it's just you talking in your head, like the simplest thing is to ask, do you have my best interests and the greater good as the core of this message? And I think, there's a lot of crazy people with crazy things in the head where that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
And the thing that I know in my writing, the automatic writing with Enoch, is that like everything I am writing is either for the greater good or my good. And so that's a beautiful place to be. And, if anyone's hearing voices that are saying anything other than really nice stuff for the greater good, not just your own personal good, but the greater good, then yeah, you need to go see Caroline, sort that out.
No, I don't want clients like that anymore. It's funny. It got so bad. I was having it so much, and I was having nightmares, and all crazy shit was happening in my house. And I called people who trained me and my supervisor. As a therapist, you're supposed to have a supervisor that you go over your cases with, and they all went, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I've never heard of that. And I'm like, who the fuck? Who do I talk to?
Yeah.
And my kids go to Catholic school, so I thought, well, go talk to the priest, right? Like, who's going to fucking know how to deal with this shit? And so I go and talk to him, and he's like, well, here's some holy water and say these Hail Marys. And I'm like thinking, yeah. I don't think this is going to fucking work. But then he said,
yeah,
but you also could just ask God to stop sending you clients like that. He said, if you don't want to, obviously, I mean, you're helping them, but if it's getting too much for you and it's freaking you out, ask God to stop it. And I was like, okay, God, if you're there, can you stop sending me fucking insane clients? Or people who are scaring me? And I don't get them anymore. They just stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you don't. Yeah. You cut that energetic tie.
I said, no more.
Yeah. No more.
So have you publicly come out and said that you're talking to Enoch?
I'm nothing of my life is private, really. Like I'm an open book at the best of times, but I choose what I like. I haven't done an episode of my podcast. I talk to the fucking crazy people in my head, but I'm by no means ashamed of any of my experiences, and so have I done it publicly? I think I've mentioned it briefly on some things, but this is probably the most I've talked about it and explained it.
Well, it's funny that you talked to me about it because...
Well, obviously, you're the person I'm supposed to talk about it because then that helps. I mean, just that whole what the fuck moment we had there, that helped cement that I'm on the right path.
No, you're not crazy.
No, cool.
Yeah, Book of Enoch. I'll have to pull it out again and have a look. Can't
Yeah,
remember
well,
what it
interestingly, I said, because I knew about the Book of Enoch previously to the automatic writing, and I said, do I need to read this? And he said, you can look at it if you want, but it won't necessarily help you that much. I was like, oh.
Well, he wrote it a long time ago.
Well, so that's
Right?
that's just it. He wrote it a long time ago, and well, to put it in a relationship context, if you needed my help, and I was willing to catch up with you whenever you wanted, I wouldn't tell you to read my book.
No.
I'd tell you just to come and catch up with me, and we'll talk about all the things we need to talk about as they come up, as are applicable to you at that time. And so I was like, yeah, of course. That's a much better way to do it.
And it just brings it back full circle to what we were talking about in the beginning of that's where you are now or where you were then, that first book. Yeah. And now, so he's obviously wanting to evolve. He doesn't want to go back to that.
He's distanced himself from his first work as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, fuck. What the fuck is right? Holy shit. Mr. Atheist, now channeling Enoch. Wow.
Yeah. Some weird shit, cool. How the world works.
Got you in the end.
Yeah.
In the best way.
Yeah. No.
Well, it shows an open mind, right?
Well, that's just it. So my life is now infinitely better because I have essentially moved myself from a very binary black and white through to just infinite shades of grey and openness. And that, so back in those days, very black and white, right and wrong, science and bullshit. And now I know that I know nothing. I know fucking nothing. And when you know nothing, that just gives you the most beautiful freedom to allow anything into your life. And that anything, that great unknown, is fucking everything.
Yeah, so true. It is the funny thing, isn't it? That the more you know, the more you don't know. It's like I know so much more now at this point in my life. And I also then, it's like the older I get, the more wisdom I have. But actually I realize how little I actually fucking know about the world and why.
Yeah. And if anyone claims to have the answer, they're fucking wrong.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we should wrap it up. So go check out Jimmy's podcast.
Yeah, it's called Inside Out with Jimi Hunt.
And check out his books as well.
JimiHunt.com.
I'm going to be JimiHunt.com. And thank you so much for chatting and sharing your story.
No worries. It's a great chat about all sorts of random shit. I hate going on podcasts and saying the same fucking stories over and over again. And so this has been a very fun podcast for me because I told no stories that I tell on anything else. So I'm happy for people to hear this.
Very cool. Well, if you enjoy this podcast, please give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and subscribe, and I'll be your best friend. All right. Bye.